that means that you can sort of fudge those damage calcs a little bit. You can still get access to that extra damage you might need for a knockout, and as a result, give yourself a little bit more freedom. Unfortunately, it does come at the cost that Whimsicott itself, not known to do much damage. Usually they have an attacking move, sometimes maybe a Moonblast or a Energy Ball if they're, you know, leaning a grass type coverage on that team. But still a very, very interesting matchup. And I think going into the mirror in particular here, because you know that when you're preparing for a tournament, when you're preparing to bring a Pokemon like Zacian and Kyogre on both sides of the, or, you know, to this matchup, you know you're going to hit this mirror matchup at some point. And you just have to think to yourself, you know, what does my team have that my opponent's team might not have? And then how can I utilize that to my advantage? I think if Paul's looking for an early quick lead, you know, something like the Whimsicott plus a Kyogre, you know, maybe you go Tailwind Water Spout turn one, just go for that big damage, try to get 2 quick knockouts. But it looks like Stefan is going to start things off a bit slower, where Paul Ruiz is just here and going full speed.
Paul Ruiz came all the way to Indianapolis to have fun, and he's right now 4-0, and he is dominating the field with the Kyogre and Zacian lead. Paul, on the bottom of your screen. On the top of your screen, Stefan having Zapdos and Grimmsnarl, so definitely some different game plans on turn one.
Yeah, and in this position in particular, I think the Grimmsnarl has to go for one of those defensive screens. You know, I think you sort of look at the Pokemon you have in the back of your party, which is Stefan should know, I would hope, and you determine, you know, who's scarier, Kyogre or the Zacian, because while Zapdos is going to be able to get some speed control down, possibly help with some damage control, you know, maybe get some chip damage down so that those 2 Pokemon on Paul's side of the field will be easier to knock out eventually. You're not going to be able to match the offensive presence of 2 of the most powerful Pokemon in the metagame right now, and you just have to pick, you know, what am I okay losing?
Paul with a turn 1 Dynamax with his Kyogre here. No switch outs. Instead, the Grimmsnarl, thanks to its Prankster, will get a paralysis onto Zacian. We're going to find out if it matters or if it will be able to break through. The Max guys are targeting down the Zapdos, and that is a full 1-hit KO because there was no Dynamax on that turn. Usually, you really see the Zapdos try to match the Dynamax on turn 1, but Stefan deciding to save it for later in the game, and then Zacian is not able to get an attack because it was paralyzed.
That is a tough break for that Zacian, as had a Behemoth Blade connected with that Grimmsnarl, that most certainly would have been a knockout. You know, now this Grimmsnarl will have the opportunity to go for at least one more attack, could choose to go for another Thunder Wave into the Dynamax Kyogre as a form of speed control, but will be matching the Dynamax with their own Kyogre, and I think that is key, because at this point, you really want to keep your Kyogre as healthy as possible, and when you're down 1 Pokemon, you just can't really switch around as easily to stall out the Dynamax turn. So your own Dynamax is your next best option for that.
And you might as well take advantage of the rain turns while you have them. Since you both came in at the same time, you have the same 5 effective turns of having your boost to your water attacks. So definitely makes sense on this turn to Dynamax the Kyogre. Light Screen from Grimmsnarl will be put up on Stefan's side for the next 5 to 8 turns, depending on what item the Grimmsnarl is holding. So those special attacks will not be hitting as hard. And you know, point in case right there, because Grimmsnarl was able to hang on where it would not have without the Light Screen. Stefan is going to retaliate with a Max Geyser of his own into the Zacian, who did protect there, so it only did a quarter of the damage that it would have.
Yeah, and seeing the Grimmsnarl go for the Light Screen there is a really good indication, I think, of what Stefan is most afraid of right now in this matchup. Now that Zacian has been paralyzed, I think Stefan is looking at their Kyogre and thinking, okay, I can connect the Max Geyser into that. Zacian's taken enough chip damage that that's probably going to be a knockout at this point. And really, all I have to do is just get that damage down onto the field. And, you know, here we go. Max Geyser going to connect with that Zacian.
This time, no protect, right? So
no protect, that's
a knockout. Unfortunately for Paul, he also max guarded on the Kyogre this turn, so will not have any damage output on his 3rd turn of Dynamax. That Spirit Break goes into the protect. That is a nice reveal, though, for Paul, because not every Grimmsnarl does run Spirit Break. Yeah,
but more of an indication that Stefan is sort of working on reducing the offensive pressure of this Kyogre on Paul's side of the field. I think recognizing that now that the Zacian is gone, there's only so many Pokemon on Paul's side of the field that can really threaten his team. You have to wonder if that Rillaboom is going to be making an appearance, as that seems like Paul's next best option. And you know, the Kyogre will struggle against the Rillaboom, but Grimmsnarl has the opportunity to go for a Reflect, which could make or break whether or not this Grassy Glide is going to be a knockout. Paul just has to try and prioritize here. You know, do I try and go for the flinch onto the Grimmsnarl? You know, guarantee that there won't be any Reflects at any point in time in this game, and worry about the possibility of taking a Max Hailstorm from that Rillaboom. Or from the Kyogre into the Rillaboom, or do you just go for the offense on the Kyogre, accept that, yes, my opponent will be able to get one more light screen up, could possibly throw some paralysis around, maybe for a turn or two, but given that Kyogre is the main threat, you know, I just want to deal with that. And I think that Stefan has done a really good job of playing, you know, matching that style on Paul's side of the field, you know, managing those threats the best he can. And we'll have to see if Paul's able to match it as we get the reveal of his final Pokemon in the Zapdos.
Zapdos does switch into that Kyogre slot there as Rillaboom opts to protect here on its first turn. Now, instead of potential Fake Out or Grassy Glide or anything else, it goes for to protect. Now, Grimmsnarl is free to reflect on this side, so now both physical and special attacks will have their damage output mitigated thanks to the Grimmsnarl. And the Max Lightning will set the electric terrain on the field, but does not claim a KO.
But that's okay, because now that Rillaboom will have to switch out and that Kyogre will have to come back in if Paul wants to rely on the priority boosted aspect of Grassy Glide. You know, Rillaboom is still at full health, is still going to be able to deal a ton of damage to either of these two Pokemon once it is able to attack. But we'll have to worry now about the possibility of being paralyzed. You know, we'll have to move slower than the Kyogre most likely. And this Zapdos as well, you know, could be knocked out by something as simple as a Origin Pulse or a Water Spout, depending on what move Stefan is running on this Kyogre.
Detect from Zapdos on that turn, so no attacks yet again. I think multiple turns in a row, Paul has either max guarded or protected or detected in this case. Paralysis goes into the Rillaboom. The target down from Water Spout will not hit the Zapdos. Does bring Rillaboom down to under half of its HP though, and now we have to find out, is it going to break through Paralysis? The answer is yes, but no grassy terrain boost, so Kyogre is still relatively healthy at around half of its HP. In this point, do you have to switch out for the priority because your Rillaboom is paralyzed? So if you don't have the grassy terrain on the field, you're essentially going to be moving last every turn.
It's a tough call, because if you do switch out that Rillaboom, that means your Kyogre is going to be taking damage, and I think you just leave the Kyogre in the back so it can at least come in with maybe some full health Water Spouts to try and tie things up later on.
Thunderbolt will knock out the Grimmsnarl, but Grimmsnarl has done its job in game one. He really has helped Stefan get to this potential win condition. Origin Pulse connecting onto both of the targets will knock out Paul. Zapdos brings down the Rillaboom very, very low, and it gets paralyzed. That's gigantic paralysis there, because as we saw from the last turn, even without grassy terrain, that Grassy Glide would have knocked out Kyogre.
Yeah, that was a huge paralysis for Stefan, recognizing that the Rillaboom is the Pokemon that you have to beat in this matchup at this point in time. And now this Kyogre, especially knowing that it has Origin Pulse and Water Spout, which is a bit of a unique thing. You know, most people will run one of those two moves and then maybe like a Scald in order to ensure that you have something that's accurate. But instead, this Kyogre, two spread moves, still at relatively good health, still has the rain up on the field. Those Origin Pulses are going to be doing massive amounts of damage. So I think if you're in Stefan's shoes, maybe you throw out a Behemoth Blade or something into that Rillaboom just to guarantee the knockout, and then you just hope that the combination of your Kyogre and the Zacian is enough to knock out the opposing Kyogre. We also know Stefan's Kyogre has a electric type attack of some sort. We saw the Max Lightning earlier on in the game, so could be time to reveal what that move is. I mean, most likely is Thunder, but you never know. This is a bit of an interesting set, and I'd be curious to see what information Stefan does give his opponent about his team.
Especially because you are setting your own range, so you have the 100% accurate Thunders. It definitely is very common for, if you are going to run an electric attack on the Kyogre for the mirror, that would be, Thunder would be the option of choice. Sacred Sword into Kyogre brings it down to under half of its HP though, and this Origin Pulse is going to connect onto both of Stefan's Pokemon here. So Kyogre is already at half health, still not enough, actually brings it to the red, but not enough for a knockout, even with a critical hit there. And then Zacian's down to about half. Here is the Thunder that we were talking about from the Max Lightning. with electric terrain set up on the field as well, that is going to increase the damage. So now Paul, all he has left is his paralyzed Rillaboom. This one is wrapped up, but I will say a minor victory for Paul was making Stefan reveal the 4th Pokemon, saying it's Zacian. So that means Stefan did not bring Rillaboom to counter hit Paul's Kyogre.
Another interesting piece of information here now, thinking back to the Liverpool Regional Championships where Stefan got top 8, I believe he was running an Assault Vest Kyogre at that point in time. Given how little damage this Kyogre took from the opposing Kyogre's Origin Pulse in the rain, and given the fact that it has the 2 spread water moves, I think that's a good indication that this might also be the Assault Vest Kyogre, and that's something to definitely keep an eye on going into Game 2, because especially when you're losing your Zacian very early on in Game 1, that means that Kyogre is just able to sit on the field, take advantage of all of that fantastic bulk, and power through your special attackers. You know, I think Paul did make the right play saving Rillaboom for the end game. I think that Rillaboom really is a key Pokemon in this matchup and can really turn things very quickly as long as it's able to keep the access to the grassy terrain. But Stefan just making that call, you know, going for that max lightning, you know, also would have done great damage to the Kyogre. So it was a good play for multiple reasons. But I think the key takeaway from that turn was changing the terrain and forcing this Rillaboom to go slower, because then you give yourself the opportunity for that paralysis to activate and give yourself that opening to win the game.
What excites me for potential adjustments in Game 2 is Stefan has traveled the globe with this core. He is so experienced with the Kyogre Zacian core, and he understands his ins and outs and has definitely faced off against the mirror. So he has the experience there. But Paul Ruiz has the experience as a former world champion. It's not his first rodeo of losing Game 1 in a best of 3. He is definitely comfortable in this position and understands that there are adjustments needed to be made to win the next 2 games and, you know, stay undefeated here in Swiss.
Yeah, and one adjustment I think that Paul has to consider going into this game too, similar to what we saw in round 4 of Swiss, maybe knock out the Grimmsnarl as soon as possible. Don't let it sit on the field, even though it's only a little bit of damage away from getting that knockout, just so the Grimmsnarl doesn't have the opportunity to go for all those attacks. I mean, we saw that Grimmsnarl, you know, set up Reflect, take the Behemoth Blade, or take an attack at that point, survive, and then go for, you know, multiple turns, Thunder Wave, Light Screen, Spirit Break. There were just so many opportunities for that Grimmsnarl to, you know, remain on the field and remain a very scary Pokemon to stare down. And given that we're seeing the same lead from Stefan here, but an adjustment from Paul, I would hope that this would open things up for that Grimmsnarl to just be removed that much quicker.
Stefan now 1 win away from winning this set, you know, remaining undefeated. And, you know, the further along you go in Swiss, the more confident you feel as you stay 4-0, 5-0, 6-0. So if you could get a convincing 2-0 victory in round 5 here, like, that's definitely going to be a big confidence boost for him. But Paul has things he needs to say to stop that.
He does, and if there are 2 Pokemon right now that have a fantastic opportunity to do so, it will be the combination of that Rillaboom and the Kyogre. A lot of Rillabooms will carry Fake Out, which will, you know, force that Grimmsnarl to flinch and not attack. And I think Stefan very confidently calling that a little bit of an unfortunate switch, you know, sending in the Incineroar to take some big damage from that Kyogre, but will get the Intimidate down on the Rillaboom. And I think the big question I have is, how much damage now can that Rillaboom do to the Kyogre? You know, it's been intimidated, and it looks like we're seeing some Dynamax as well.
The other question is, what did Stefan leave in the back? Because Incineroar was not brought to Game 1.
No.
So either Zapdos or Zacian has not been brought here in Game 2. We can assume it'll be Zacian because he's his other restricted, but you don't always necessarily need to bring both pairs there. We will have the Dynamax from Stefan on Kyogre. Fake Out goes into the Incineroar, which just switched in, and the Water Spout gets the knockout on Incineroar. So Incineroar really taking one for the team on this turn, saying, you know, I'll take the brunt of the Water Spout if it lets you get this Max Lightning into Kyogre. Super effective, no electric terrain though, so that was the key difference there, and it's not a knockout.
But more importantly, grassy terrain is now gone. the Rillaboom has been intimidated, and I would assume that Grimmsnarl is going to come right back out onto the field to set up Reflect. So that means that the Kyogre on Stefan's side of the field could take a Grassy Glide or two, or could just be a Zacian. Stefan, you know, revealing all 4 of his Pokemon very early on in this game too, possibly feeling confident about Zacian's ability to just score the knockout on the Rillaboom right off the bat, and that's another way to protect the Kyogre. You know, we saw this Kyogre on Stefan's side of the field did move second, but Paul was relying on Water Spout, and now that it's taken so much damage, this Kyogre probably forced to switch attacks.
And at this point, you don't really have to worry about not having Zapdos and Rillaboom to counter Kyogre because it's so low already. Any type of attack is going to take it down. The Rillaboom went for a Protect on this turn, so no damage into that slot. But the Sacred Sword from Zacian will be able to clean up Kyogre there. No offensive pressure from Paul on this turn, and then the Max Geyser from Stefan is going to go into that Protect. So not only did he protect the attack, but it was also a resisted attack into the ground type, or grass type, excuse me.
Yeah, Stefan confidently relying on the fact that that Rillaboom was not going to do enough damage in a single hit to knock out the Kyogre. So relying on Zacian, who is the fastest Pokemon on the field at this point, to knock out the Kyogre on Paul's side of the field, and just accepting that I'll get some decent chip down on this Rillaboom, or if my opponent decides to switch out the Rillaboom, you know, I'll get that Max Geyser, which would have done a ton of damage to the Zacian, for example, which is Paul's next Pokemon up on the field. I still think that Stefan is in a very commanding position here. I do have to wonder what his priorities are going to be at this point in time, just because, you know, the Zacian and the Rillaboom are certainly in a wonderful position to go on the offensive for Paul finally, and Stefan having to switch in that Grimmsnarl at this point in time is just going to be really tough. You know, you are going to be taking a ton of damage from a potential Behemoth Blade at that point, but it's already looks like we're slowing things.
Oh, Player Up missed the Rillaboom. That would have been a lot of damage onto the Rillaboom, followed up by the potential attack from Kyogre. Instead, that Max Geyser will go into Zacian's Protect, so the correct call from Paul on this turn. And high horsepower into Zacian. It is super effective, but it's not doing too much damage there. So the Player Up, an unfortunate miss for Stefan, but you know, as of right now, both your Pokemon are still in the green. You have the Grimmsnarl in the back potentially. It's not the worst position for Stefan to clinch out this game too.
No, but both these Zacian have taken enough damage at this point that a Behemoth Blade from the other side will guarantee the knockout. So the big question is which one of these Zacian is going to be faster in this turn. It looks like it's Paul's, but going on the defensive with the substitute instead.
So that substitute, essentially you're sacrificing your turn and 25% of your HP to see who is going to be faster. The Behemoth Blade goes into Rillaboom instead of the substitute. Very unfortunate for Paul, and a great call from Stefan, as now this Water Spout is a single target attack going into the Zacian, and that will be enough to break the substitute. So I think Paul was going for an information game there. If I substitute and he Behemoth Blades my Zacian, now I know that I can potentially be faster depending on how we're trained. Unfortunately, Stefan did not fall for the bait, though, and targeted down the Rillaboom, which was the bigger threat that turn.
Exactly. You know, Zacian is a very scary Pokemon to be staring down, especially in this position. But because Stefan recognized that that Rillaboom was the bigger threat, you know, that Grassy Glide, even without terrain, you know, Dynamax is over. This Kyogre is going to be taking a lot of damage from that attack. It's better to just get rid of the Rillaboom in a way that you're very comfortable with, and then you sort of figure out, okay, how am I going to handle this Zacian moving forwards? Knowing that the Grimmsnarl is Stefan's last Pokemon in the back as well gives you a few more outs against the Zacian, because no longer do you have to worry about speed control. You can go for that priority Thunder Wave, lower the Zacian's speed, and then go for an Origin Pulse, and that's a win condition. You don't have to worry as much about, you know, how those two Pokemon are going to match up. Now, the one thing that Paul still does have available to him is going to be this Dynamax, and while Behemoth Blade will still deal a ton of damage, Zapdos should have the opportunity to get one attack in.
It's definitely a benefit when you can Dynamax so late into a matchup, because not only is the Zapdos full HP, but it has now had its HP doubled at this point, so you're really working with a lot of effective HP at the latter half of this match. Behemoth Blade from Stefan will go into the substitute again, so that is definitely what Paul wanted to see on this turn. You lose the substitute, and you are now lower than 25% HP, so you can't substitute again. But you just saw 2 turns in a row. You're faster. Kyogre hangs on at 5 HP. That's through the Life Orb and Dynamax. Kyogre just barely hangs on. Stefan really does love Kyogre. Has been training it well all season for it to live and hang on with that hit.
It has to be Assault Vest. I'm sorry. It's just the fact that it was able to hold on and lock in that knockout with Origin Pulse against the opposing Zacian means that all Stefan has to do to win this set quite comfortably, might I add, is target down that Zapdos with the Zacian. And Paul's in a tough position. You know, yes, you still have your Pokemon with Dynamax. Yes, you still can do some big damage. Who do you target? How do you find your out in this situation? Because you're going to be taking this Behemoth Blade, and Kyogre, if allowed to attack, could just finish things up. But Behemoth Blade is going to be enough.
That's what double damage does to a Dynamax Pokemon. As Zapdos is knocked out and Stefan Mott wins round 5 of Swiss here at the Indianapolis Regional Championship.
What a incredible game that was. And I think it just goes to show how comfortable Stefan was with this matchup. You know, he's been running this team pretty much consistently throughout the year so far. You know, he's made a couple of changes between